foundation with gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, straw, each one's work will become manifest, for the day will disclose it, because it will be revealed by fire, and the fire will test what sort of work each one has done. If the work that anyone has built on the foundation survives, he will receive a reward. If anyone's work is burned up, he will suffer loss, though he himself will be saved, but only as through fire. He's talking about building our way or building God's way. If anyone's work is burned up, he will suffer loss, though he himself will be saved. So you don't lose your salvation, but your work for the Lord or for yourself will be manifest. Building God's way is the only thing that will survive Judgment Day. Verse 13 in there, I'm sure she showed it up there, but you'll notice it was capitalized. The word day is capitalized in the English Standard Version. That's right, because he's referring to Judgment Day. He's referring to the end of time. God's going to evaluate everything that we've done, everything that we've said, everything that we've used our gifts for, time, talent, and treasure, everything. And not everybody's going to score 100%. I'm going to tell you that now. Not everybody's going to. Some of us are going to have, all of us are going to have some of our work burned up. Hopefully, none of us will have also been burned up. Salvation is by grace through faith. It's a gift. You don't work for it, but you are a workman for God in the building of His temple, of His kingdom. So it's building God's way that will survive Judgment Day. Building our way will not. Reminds me, in a way, of that parable of the talents back in Matthew 25, where somebody gave one individual 5 talents. A talent is a sum of money. Gave somebody 5 talents, gave another one, I think it was 2 talents, another one 1 talent. Anyway, the guy that got 1 talent, he buried it. And when the master came back, he was angry. He said, "Why didn't you invest the talent that I gave you? Why didn't you at least put it in the bank to get some interest?" And he was angry, and he took away that talent and gave it to the one who had 10. There's a very similar message in that parable. Building with inferior material, which is the wood, hay, straw, is tantamount to basically destroying or working towards destroying the temple of God. Now that's a principle or a concept that we might have to roll around in our minds for quite a while to get the significance of that. Verse 16 and 17 says, "Do you not know..." Well, let me back up a little bit. I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. This gold, silver, precious stones, don't think that precious stones really means jewels, diamonds, rubies, emeralds, that sort of stuff. That's an easy thing. But precious stones are really building stones that are quite costly, very costly stones. That kind of thing is what's in Paul's mind. And so when you think about building the temple in the Old Testament, those were quite costly stones. So you can choose those, or you can choose wood, hay, straw, things that would be burned up when the judgment of fire comes upon them. But verse 16 and 17 says, "Do you not know that you are God's temple, and that God's Spirit dwells in you? If anyone destroys God's temple, God will destroy him, for God's temple is holy, and you are that temple." Now, this is a passage where you need to pay attention. It's not up there. Marginal note that the you in those 2 verses is plural. It's not singular. This is where a good spot where maybe Southernese would help us a little bit, putting y'all in there. That's right. That's right. Do you not know that y'all are God's temple, and that God's Spirit dwells in y'all? May not sound good, and probably if my wife was feeling better and she was here, she's an English teacher, she'd probably cringe and slide underneath the chair. If anyone destroys God's temple, God will destroy him, for God's temple is holy, and y'all are that temple. The word destroy is also interesting. It really means corrupts. Anybody who corrupts it, but with the ultimate end being destruction. So here's the thought. Each one of us is building. And I want you to think about this in two ways, how you build. You build yourself, but you also build others. And if we use inferior material, spiritually speaking, we're using wood, hay, straw. Something is going to be burned up. To build ourselves and or to build others, not only is it not going to last, but we might actually be found to be working against God. In fact, as we are, working to tear down His temple. If y'all are the temple, and we understand that in the sense of the worldwide church, then building, I don't know what kind of image goes through in your mind, but as we build, the building gets bigger. Gets bigger. And over time it gets bigger. It's one of these edifices that never really stops growing unless we're using inferior material. Then it can start to regress in size. As the church gets smaller, if the church gets smaller, because of things that we teach ourselves, because of things that we teach others, if the church gets smaller, then is that not destroying the temple? Seems to me it is. Keep in mind what Paul is saying here is, in a roundabout way, is the worldly philosophy that we use to make sense of reality, to make sense of how God works, to make sense of how He's moving in the world through us and through others. If we don't use God's word, that's building with wood, hay, and straw. But if we use God's word, that's building with gold, silver, and precious stones. Items that will survive the fire, survive the end times. But also even on an individual basis, using that inferior material, that worldly philosophy, really weakens us. It weakens us. How many times have we heard